hello, and welcome back to the Reach In Talk Show, where I am yours truly, the Dr. Nicole Lynette, your host. And look, we have a lot to unpack this month. For those of you who are not aware, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so we have a lot of topics we're going to discuss. They're going to be hard but necessary topics in hopes that we can prevent our children from being abused. So today we have an amazing guest who's going to help us unpack our topic for today. And he is a native Houstonian. He's been in the education industry for nearly 2 decades. And in his stellar career so far, he's been awarded Teacher of the Year, and he's had many opportunities to impact many scholars at multiple grade levels. Without further ado, help me welcome Mr. Clifford Lee.
How are you?
I'm doing fantabulous. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay.
I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have. I think it's a much needed conversation, so
Okay.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, awesome. So before we get started into this conversation, why don't you share with our guests, our audience viewers, a little bit about your background?
Yes, as she stated, I am a native Houstonian, born and raised. I graduated from Madison High School, proud Madison Marlin alum.
I'm so sorry your parents didn't know any better, but it's okay.
And you went to where?
You know where I went to, Jumpin' Jack Yates High School. I am a true lioness. Yes.
Well, this is going to be a short interview because I can't deal with the red and gold. No.
We know most people cannot, but we help you.
After high school, I went to the University of Houston Central Campus.
Okay.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs, I'm with you on that one.
Graduated from the University of Houston with a degree in interdisciplinary studies, which is just a fancy word for education. And I knew I wanted to go into education because I worked at the YMCA when I was younger, and there were a lot of students there who didn't have fathers, right?
Okay.
And so they were always looking to me. They used to call me Mr. Clifford for different reasons. And so I thought about it, and I was like, well, what is the best way to reach these students, to make a bigger impact?
Okay.
And so that's when I steered toward the education career.
Okay.
And then I should have known that that's what was going to happen because both of my parents were educators. My sister was also an educator. My parents are both retired now, so mom taught high school at Madison.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I see you didn't have another choice. I understand now.
Yes, I was there with my mom and my dad. He coached at a middle school in Pasadena, so for a long time as well. And so that's how I got into education, and that's why I'm here today to discuss some things with you about kids and education and different things. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, we know you have a lot of value to bring to the show, so I'm so glad you said yes and made it here. So, talking about your parents, so they were educators, they're retired, so they were somewhat your inspiration.
Yes.
So, you've been an educator for nearly 2 decades.
Yes.
So, what's been your motivation to keep going?
The motivation is always the children. No matter what happens with education, there have been lots of changes, from TOS test to tax test to STAR test and all the high stakes testing that they do. But the thing that never changes is the children.
Yeah.
Children need positive influences in their life. And so that is why I have continued down this path so that I can continue to mentor students, to inspire students, to get students to see that they can become whatever they want to become, and that there are people that believe in them. Everybody's not against them. Everybody's not going to beat them down. Somebody is an advocate for you. So that's why I continue down this path. So.
And I think it's very interesting what you stated. You said, a lot of the processes change in the education industry, but what does not change are the children.
Correct.
Which is somewhat an antagonistic statement to what I hear. And what I hear in society is you hear people say, "Ooh, these children these days, they not like the children back in the day. These children are different." So what is your thought process about that type of statement?
That's an accurate statement.
Mm-hmm.
That the when I first started teaching, the behaviors of the children are not quite the same as they are today. So it is accurate. But what I will say is that the heart of the child, the mind of the child, that hasn't changed. Their circumstances have changed, but if you dig deep enough, that child that curses all the time, that child that has anger, they still want to be rewarded, right?
Yes.
If you pull out a bag of candy, no, I'm talking middle school, high school, whatever, all elementary. Pull out, guess what? They still want that blow pop too.
Right.
If you get a jumpy house or whatever to celebrate, guess what? They want to go jump in that jump.
Right,
Why?
right.
Because they're children.
Yes.
They're just dealing with some really adverse circumstances. So are some, and it's not all children. Let's be clear about that too,
Right.
because we don't want to make that blanket statement that all the children are like that.
Right.
But yeah, there are. I think children today are a little more disrespectful than they were when I first got into education. But I do believe that there's a reason for that,
Right.
and a lot of it has to do with the home life, and home has become more difficult for. From parents due to the economy, due to personal decisions that they make, and don't want to get too far off topic, but I do believe that drug use is extremely prevalent in our community, unfortunately, and that also plays a part. So when parents make decisions to do things that benefit them instead of things that benefit their children,
Right.
that affects the children, and so they take that anger out on their teachers and on their peers.
Okay. And I think that, all of that is relevant. And however, I pull from a different thought process. I believe the children are still the same as they were back in the day. I believe something you said, circumstances have
Right.
changed. I believe there's less tolerance for children. Children are seemingly raising themselves more today
Correct.
than their parents. Children come here the same way they've always come to here,
Correct.
through a womb. And then when the environments change, I think the environments have changed, because there was a time, and I know we don't do corporal punishment anymore. I know. But remember back in the day, every time I say that, I think about my parents. I never thought I'd be here talking about back in the day. But when, even prior to my generation, when they say, when little Johnny did something, got in trouble, the neighbor said something.
Correct.
There was accountability there.
There was a village.
There was a village there. And I believe because the village, and we say it takes a village to raise a child, but when the village is broken,
Correct.
then the village raises broken children.
Correct.
So that's why I say it's not the children that have changed. I think the village has changed.
And I agree with you.
Because, I think it's a travesty to expect out of young people what haven't been invested in them. I talk to young people all the time, and the things that they say to me, perfect example, I had a young lady, I met her. She was headed to middle school, but I thought she was a parent. Let's just say that. I thought she was a parent. Well, she was a middle schooler. She was an 8th grader, 14 years of age. And her challenge was, she was visiting dad. Mom was supposed to pick her up to bring her to school, and mom never showed up. And she shared her struggle with mom and dad was divorced for 3 years. She has a sister, 15, because she was talking about being on the show. My sister need to be on your show, right? And I was like, well, okay. But at the time, I didn't know the sister was 15.
Right,
I thought
right.
maybe the sister was older.
Right.
And then I said, really? She was like, yeah, because since my parents have been divorced, all she does is go to her room. Mom goes to her room. Dad don't really spend time.
Right.
And this 14-year-old said to me, I feel like the dad in the house.
Wow.
That's heavy.
Right. And
Right.
and believe it or not, that happens often.
Yes.
It's I've even seen it on the elementary level, where the fifth grade student is responsible for the little brothers and sisters, right?
Yes.
Like I've had people come to me and they say, well, "No, Mr. Lee, I cannot leave. I have to go get my little brother. I gotta go get my little cousin because if I come home without them, then I get in trouble."
Right.
And then when they get home, there's nobody there, so they're responsible for not only getting them home, then making them noodles and trying to get their homework done and keeping them from running outside, and that's not a 10, 11-year-old's responsibility.
Right.
And so, in their parents' defense, though, they are trying to put food on the table.
Right.
Many of them are working 2 jobs. They
Right.
don't want to depend on the government for assistance. They want to go out there and make it happen themselves. But when they're doing that, that puts a child in a very, very difficult place, right?
Right.
And so that child doesn't get enough sleep. They don't get enough rest. They don't get to be a child.
Right.
And so when they come to school and all of a sudden we're asking them to do this rigorous academic curriculum, they're like, "I just need a nap."
Wow, it's so amazing. That's a good segue to an example I had. I was volunteering at a school, and I remember this young lady every Monday. That's exactly what she was doing in the classroom. She was napping. And the teacher would fuss at her, and the teacher would just say, "Okay, you're going to get a zero because you're not doing your classwork." And I remember I was so disturbed by it. So I asked the teacher, "Is it okay if I just talk to the little girl?" And I talked to her, and come to find out, it was exactly what you're saying. On the weekends, she was taking on the role and the responsibility of the adult. She was taking care of her siblings, and they were actually with other adults while mom was at work. But the other adults who were supposed to have been taking care of them was not doing what they were supposed to have been doing, and she ended up being the caregiver.
Correct.
And so about the time she made it back to school on Monday, she was exhausted. But because we were able to, again, reach in and look a little bit deeper and get a little closer, from that we were able to get some resources to the family.
Right.
So when I think about, just having this portion of dialogue, we haven't even really gotten to the deep stuff.
The topic that
we're really headed
but
to.
But I do want to jump on and make a plea to your audience that had you not been there inside the school, that little girl would have continued to suffer.
Right.
Because the teacher didn't try to reach out and establish that relationship with her.
Right.
But that's why we need you and everybody else to sign up to volunteer in schools. These children need you. Teachers can only do so much, right? Elementary teachers have 40, 50 students. Middle school and high school have over 100 students. They cannot take care of all of them by themselves. But if the community comes together and volunteers in the school, then it can make a difference. Just that simple conversation she had. And then you bring that to somebody who can find the resources to help families, to help kids.
Right.
It will go a long, long way. So I'm imploring anyone who's watching this to step up, to volunteer. Don't be afraid. The children are not going to bite you. They're looking for help. They need someone. They need an advocate. They need someone to talk to, a voice other than the voices that they hear every day in the school. So please step up and volunteer.
So, not trying to be the devil's advocate, but with much experience I have in schools and communities for decades, my children now adults, it's the narrative that community and parents and volunteers are not really wanted on the campuses. At least from my experience, and several people I know experience, you can sign up through VIPs and all of that, but when you're not, let's just say, raising funds for the school or something of that nature, but you're really interested in the success of the school, seem like there's pushback. So how do we really share with the administration that we're there to partner with them for the benefit and the success, the total, as a lot of schools have the wraparound assistance for those students?
Well, I will say, COVID shut down a lot of people being able to come on campus. But now that those restrictions have been lifted, Volunteers are able to come back on campus. Parents are welcomed on campus, but it's at the discretion of the principal.
Right.
So I understand what you're saying. It depends on which principal you're speaking with.
Right.
But the principals that I've had the pleasure of working with and speaking with, they want mentors. They want people on campus to help out their students. So it just depends on the principal, really. But I like I said, I can introduce you to some who want some help if you want to help. So
Okay. Well, I know a lot of parents would like to help where their children are. And this is even prior to COVID. I know it for a fact that there are campuses, the principals are like, no. But we have a different show for that. We can't go into that because I found out some legal information regarding that.
Okay.
But that'll be another show. So I agree with you about, volunteers coming into schools because, again, the whole thought of it takes a village to raise a child, but I know the presence of parents on campuses can make a difference, even if that child's parent is not there.
Correct.
The fact that it's a parent there, our approach can be a little different because they're looking at the teachers and the administrators, more of the officials.
Right.
And then parents are more like, those mentors, like you say. Right. I was a part of an organization, I think it was like Ministers Against Crime or whatever, and where at the end of each school year, we came on to help reduce the fights on the campuses and things of that nature. And it actually worked because of presence of other than administrators, but community being in the schools. So I know that works, and I know that matters. And since we're there, this is a good segue there are some programs, initiatives that you were able to implement in some of the schools. Tell us about some of those.
I helped to start a mentoring program at an elementary school that I was a part of in the Third Ward area. Working with local churches and the Texas Southern University, University of Houston, to recruit male mentors mostly to come into the school to help out with some boys who were having some behavior challenges. And it was a very successful program. It ran for the 3 years that I was there, and then I left that school. Hopefully it's still going, I'm not sure. And then I asked some of my personal friends, because, you ladies, y'all got it going on, right?
Okay.
So I have lots of female entrepreneur friends who have the time to come into the schools, and I matched them up with certain young ladies who needed that role model, and they came through for me, and that went extremely well. They bought lunch for the kids and ate lunch with the kids and different things like that. Running a basketball program, photography club, gardening club. One of the things that I want to do is introduce students to as many things as possible outside of their environment, because a lot of them don't get to go outside of their environment, right? They don't have, a lot of them live in apartments or, community housing, so they don't have a yard where they can go out and start a garden, right? But what our gardening program taught them is that you can have a little small garden, right? All you need is a pot. And you take that pot and you plant those seeds and cultivate it, and believe it or not, you can get a tomato.
Or a cup. Your pot become the cup, the styrofoam cup.
Exactly.
Let me tell you, I learned this from my daughter. We was in apartments, and my daughter on the patio created all these little gardens, and I'm going like, what in the world are you doing? So she's growing tomatoes and what is it? The little herbs,
basil,
and
basil
all of
grows
this.
real
I'm
well
going
down
like,
here.
okay. She even started a watermelon garden.
Yes,
I was like,
it's watermelon's difficult to grow, but if you can do it, you'll get a little round watermelon.
Watermelons.
And then then we'll move on. But just that gardening program, it taught them, because there's a big food desert in Third Ward. But it taught them that you can grow your own food and you can eat it, but then you can also sell it. So there's an entrepreneurial part of that as well. So all of that worked together to to try to introduce students to other things.
So, based on all these initiatives that Mr. Lee has started, so if you have gifts in those areas and you want to volunteer to assist and help expand that program for greater impact, we'll have his information on our website and you'll be able to contact him and provide some volunteer opportunities. So, now I want to kind of scale back when you were talking about starting your mentor program because there were young men that were having behavioral issues, right? So now I want to kind of dive into our main topic today about preventing sexual abuse of children in our schools. There have been so many reports of teachers violating our children from the elementary level all the way to high school. So I want us to dive into that topic. But before we go there, we're going to be right back. To Reach In Talk Show, where I am your host, Dr. Nicole Lynette, and we are here with our great guest, Mr. Clifford Lee, talking about preventing sexual abuse of our children in the schools. So, before our break, we were talking about the behavioral issues that happen on our campuses and the inappropriate behavior of teachers that violate our children. If you can just give me a little bit of your position about the prevalence of this sexual abuse of children in our schools.
Much like everyone else, when you hear those stories, it is very confusing. Why an adult would prey upon a child. I'll start with the high school level because I hear more about that in the news, where they're establishing inappropriate relationships with students and inviting them off campus and things like that. And I think a lot of it goes to people are not, I want to say, not whole, right? They don't know themselves. They haven't done the work that they need to do to know who they are as a person, right? So just a theory that I have. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert, but I think some people in high school, right, may not have had the best experience. They may not were the most popular person in the world, right? But they come back as an educator. And so now you have this power, you have this position, people are looking up to you, people are, different things like that. So then when the popular boy in high school, likes you as a teacher, for some reason in their mind that means something different. And this is just my theory, and that's how these relationships start. That doesn't make it right. And like I said, it's very confusing. But I also want to say that, and people won't agree with me, but cell phones, social media, I believe plays a huge part in this, right? Because everybody gives their kid a cell phone because you don't know when a school shooting is going to happen. You don't know when an emergency is going to happen. You want to get in contact with your child. I get that. But they have phones where you can just communicate, right? All you can do is call. All you can do is text. You don't need the internet. You don't need social media, because that's how some of those communications start, right? And also all the things that a child can pull up on their phone. If you give a third grader a phone and they have access to the internet, they're exposed to so much out there. And I believe that exposure is creating a lot of trauma that people don't want to talk about, but that's why
Okay.
we're here to dive into it a little bit.
Yeah,
So
we're going to dive on in because my organization is a nonprofit. It's Resuscitate Inc. And our actual cause is child sexual abuse prevention. And what's interesting, and I appreciate your theory, however, we're going to draft it back a little bit more because one of the facts we know is 2 out of 3 teachers, they're not trained to prevent, recognize, or respond to child sexual abuse. Perfect example, not too long ago in the news, had the news header was Teacher of the Year now being charged
right,
with child sexual abuse, indecency with children, and he was the Teacher of the Year. So it meant the parents missed it, the colleagues missed it, the whole district missed it, the
right,
administration
exactly.
missed it. And I understand about social media and all of that, but some of the facts that we want to share is this, that according to the CDC, Centers of Disease Control, 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused, and 1 in 13 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday.
Wow.
The median age of abuse is 9. So that's like 4th grade. Um, 60% of children never tell.
Right.
And the average age, I'm going to let you guess it. The average age for disclosure, what do you think that age would be?
Probably 19, 21, somewhere around there.
Yeah. I wish. It's actually 52.
Wow. So they hold it in all those years.
There are some that hold it in to the grave because of the trauma that is associated with the incident. And I remember after we had an opportunity to provide a parent prevention workshop after the event happened.
Right.
And we were talking about earlier how reactionary we are as a society, how we're not as proactive or preventive. And I think because we want to believe that all people are great, and especially teachers and educators, because we have great educators.
Right,
we do. However, when we're talking about child sexual abuse prevention in our schools, one of the things we learned during that workshop was when we began to share the signs of a potential perpetrator, the parents were like, oh my God, he did this, every box was checked. So you have a quote that you live by. It's by Malcolm X. It says, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And I think that's an amazing quote for what we're talking about, because the truth is prevention is possible.
Yes, it is.
It's possible. But if we're not equipped,
Yeah, you gotta know.
then
the
we're not
signs.
exempt,
Gotta
right?
Know the signs. Yes.
So my question, I'm not too much wanting to deal with the theory right now of why a perpetrator does the things that they do, but how can we prevent it? Because if most incidents happen one-on-one, one-on-one. So as an educator, just thinking about the work that you're putting in the classroom. Maybe someone has to be in detention, if they still do that.
Right.
Or, for some of the programs that you have, what are, just from your thought process, what are some ways that we can maybe minimize the risk of children being abused, even at the high school level? Because I know you talked about the social media, but just in that, what are some ways that...
Well, I just want to echo what you just said. Education, right? Knowing the warning signs,
Right.
Knowing what to look for, not only from the perpetrator, but from the students. Because from my understanding, students who have been abused, they exhibit certain behaviors. And so if we are taught to recognize those signs,
Right.
then we may be able to reach that child, get that child help, move that child away from the home or the environment or wherever it may be taking place. But as far as prevention goes, I just think it's establishing relationships with students, right? Once a student trusts you, then they
Right.
will talk to you.
Yes.
And so, and a lot of our students come from broken homes and tough environments, and they've been let down time and time again. They were
Right.
promised this, promised that, and people don't come through. So they don't trust easily.
Right.
So you have to work at
Yes.
it, right?
Right.
And so if you work at it and they do begin to trust you,
Yes.
then you can have these conversations.
Right.
And if something happens, they will open up to you and feel comfortable letting you know. Now, as you said, this particular trauma that we're speaking about today is not one that they want to talk about, right?
Right.
So that's going to be a little bit more difficult to reach. But once again, if organizations like yours were put on district wide, and it should be mandatory,
Right.
and then as educators, we would know the warning signs, right? So we would see their triggers, and then we would be able to, whoever has a relationship with that child, try to bridge that conversation carefully,
Right.
and but definitely that would help us out a lot. So.
And when you shared, they don't want to talk about it. Actually, in our experience, they want to talk about it.
Okay.
They just want, and you said something that's so valuable, that's so impactful. One of the classes we teach is on how to become a trusted adult.
Okay.
And you put in the work. I have found, just in research and just hearing and just the temperature in society, it just seems like people are so, their tolerance for youth is very short. Majority of the time, if you had elementary level, middle school, high school, a lot of people want to go with those younger kids, I've heard even social workers, I've heard professionals say, the most important years of a child's life is in the younger years.
Right.
And I challenged this for years, and now they actually have the scientific data and psychology
Right.
behind it. I said, no, that's not only. I said also during that time of puberty, the middle school
Oh, no
age
doubt.
is
No
so
doubt.
valuable.
Yes, it is.
Gangs look for those middle school, fifth
Right.
grade to eighth grade, because they're experiencing puberty, they're trying to find their independence, they're not sure of their identity,
Right.
and there are elements that are waiting for that. But I wanted to say they're waiting to talk about it. We were on one of the campuses, the high school campuses. All we did was talk about one of our boundary events. That's one of our curriculums. We talked about boundaries. And when we begin to talk about boundaries, they just begin to share all their information, because usually, and as a matter of fact, how we first met.
Right.
We were in an event, and just because we presented about child, and I like to say the words child sexual abuse,
Right.
because I know it's something we don't want to hear
Right.
and we don't want to talk about, but we have to. And at that point, I would say we have a way of shutting down a room, but we were in a room full of men.
Right.
And when men begin to confess and disclose in a public setting,
Right.
and because victims and survivors are just looking for an opportunity to release the pressure, because it's pressure. I'm a survivor thriver. And it's interesting that I release more now since we've been talking and sharing our organization, because it's needed, because sometimes your story can be the key to help unlock
Yes,
somebody else's
yes,
captivity.
yes.
So when these children are becoming a trusted adult, and I don't mean any harm to your parents, but sometimes we think that our children trust us, and our children don't really trust us
You're
with
right.
the hard stuff. And there's a lot of dynamics to that. You have to register for a class. But becoming a trusted adult, and teachers and educators is very important for as much as, and let me just, to be fair to educators have a lot of pressure on them.
No doubt.
You're talking about what's expected from you all from administrators. Sometimes you have to be the parent and caregiver, and that's why we need the partnerships we were talking about earlier about people coming in and volunteering in the schools. But becoming a trusted adult is so important. And I know you're talking about the high school level, but we had an example, which is a true story of a young girl. She was in elementary school. She was a kindergartner. And her teacher was the trusted adult. It's just that because the teacher was not trained to recognize some things and some things on the parents' part about not teaching their children the anatomical and biological anatomy names for all of their body parts. You know, it took a little longer to get intervention for the child, but the little girl in story time stood up and leaned in on the teacher's leg, and she said, "My daddy ate my cookies last night."
Wow.
So the children, they're laughing. My mom and them eat my cookies all the time.
Exactly.
And the teacher is over her head because the parent has not taught the child the right name of her private body parts. And so it took a little longer. But she trusted that teacher enough to share that with her. And if the teacher would have known right then, some intervention could have started. And so teachers and educators, unfortunately, we have educators that are the perpetrators. This teacher of the year, he literally would send groups of children to the restroom to go to the restroom together, which was his job, while he molested the one that was left behind on the campus. But he was also at the parents' homes and becoming very involved in their lives and grooming the children, grooming the parents. And I want to say this, parents, children are not just groomed. You're being groomed too. That's why you have to be very careful of being trusting with everybody around your children. And as a result, of course, he's teacher of the year. Everybody loved him. But perpetrators, and this is not, and let me be clear, because one of the points we share with parents in our parent workshops is we want them to take the guilt off. Because one thing about perpetrators, they're very skilled at placing themselves in positions of trust. Yeah, they go get the degrees for becoming educators or coaches or anywhere they can have access to children. And they're skilled at that. So it's not your fault if you have not been educated, because child sexual abuse is not a household conversation that we have sitting around the table, right?
It is not.
So, and we're taught to trust the teachers. The teachers, they look out for you. They care for you. And the truth is, we have an educator right here. He loves children. But he's not a perpetrator, right? But then as colleagues, because this is a colleague that we're talking about. And even when talking with the principal expressed it, let me know. When they began to talk to the colleagues would say, it was something a little different about him, but we couldn't put our finger on it.
Right.
So that's why education is so important. And that's why I think this quote by Malcolm X is so important, because it is the passport to the future. But if we don't get educate the educators on what prevention looks like, right? And we talk about the intervention part. If something happens, then we can intervene. Let's talk about the signs.
But it's more important to prevent it than to, if it never happens, that is the best course of action. That is our goal, is to protect these babies so they can grow up and be healthy and whole and happy and develop into whomever it is that they're going to become in our society, so they can be productive members of society. But I am in total agreement with you. And I also want to say that I think children nowadays have more free time because parents are not at home. So they have opportunities and access to I hate to say that, but it's true though. They have to be abused, right? Because sometimes they don't realize that they are being abused, right? The 13-year-old girl there's a 20-year-old guy in the neighborhood or in the community, and he's convinced her that he likes her and whatever, right? That's abuse.
Yes,
And
that's part of grooming.
she thinks it's love. She thinks that but that's abuse as well. And those things I think are really difficult to prevent, because that child will share with you that I have a older boyfriend, he got a car, whatever, right? And so then you try to get people involved, but a lot of people, they don't want to call the police, they don't want to go there. So
see that part. Now I'm going to give a different perspective to it. Can be prevented. It can be prevented if we educate our children.
Correct.
Because 90% of those who perpetrate are people the children know or the family is familiar with.
Right.
So because we do have a youth program, it's called Youth Wise Prevention Camps. It's for middle to high school age youth. We literally educate the youth. And the reason why we do that, because again, we just talked about the stats, 90% who they know and the family is familiar with. So unfortunately, let me just say this. Adults are 100% responsible for making sure that our children are safe and protected.
I agree.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. So we have to take steps further and educate our children, educate our young people. I hear stories after stories from survivors that, like you said, didn't even know they were in abusive situations, right? They didn't know it was abuse. Now, once the violation happened, they can all say they can tell something was wrong. Because once you violate it, a violation is a violation.
Right.
Then you may not understand clearly and fully what that is. But that young girl, like some of the curriculums, and I think some of your programs, which I hate, when we were in school, there were a lot of community programs that children could access. But that's not the case today. And so when we begin to educate them, it can help bring prevention, because now they understand what's really happening, right? We are not able to save everybody, but we can prevent. If all of us working together on the private sector, the public sector, the political sector, if everybody's working together to push prevention. And I know this because the Centers of Disease Control, and I keep using Center of Disease Control because you can go Google it and pull their fast fact sheet. Type in child sexual abuse prevention, and the Centers of Disease Control specifically states that the gap in prevention is the lack of prevention resources being placed into prevention, because most resources are given to intervention, of course, helping through trauma, and also in our prison systems. Okay, so what about the prevention piece, right?
Right.
So if we can raise awareness and really begin to speak to this, and I know it's a taboo topic, but it's a taboo topic because we're not talking about it enough, right? So when I have children, young people, because when we talk, they just start spewing.
Correct.
But it's not just young people. Part of the challenge also is there are adults who don't want to talk about it because they have suppressed trauma themselves. So there's been generational cycles of sexual abuse, and that's in the schools, in the homes, in the communities. And like you said, people are afraid to step in and intervene. That's another curriculum we teach about becoming an active bystander and what you can do and how you can intervene. Why? Because it still takes a village to raise a child.
Yes, it
right?
does.
And I know we're good at saying, well, charity begins at home. Where are their parents? Come on, reality is you already said it. Parents are not in the home like they used to be. So do we just turn our heads like ostriches and say, that's not my child? So their parents need to deal with that.
And I hate when people take that attitude because that child is going to become an adult one day.
Yes.
And their adult behavior will affect you in your lifetime, right? So if you don't take care of them now, it is going to affect you.
Right.
No, it may not be your child, but they are going to grow up and be an adult. And we all want positive citizens around us, right?
Right.
And so if you don't help now, you're going to pay for it later. And
Ooh,
so,
that's heavy. Somebody needs to tweet that. If you don't help now, you're gonna pay for it later. The reason why I intervene, I guess, call me everybody's mama, auntie, grandmama, whatever, because I talk to children. I don't care if I know you or not.
Correct.
And my mental thought behind that is, if all that child is know what their behavior is now, it may be learned behavior, allowed behavior, whatever. But if something happens to that child and I could have said something,
right,
then I'm gonna
Right.
feel guilty about that.
Yes.
But if I say something to that child, it's up to that child to adhere to what advice I gave them or recommendations or not. But if something happens, at least I say, you know what, I can sleep at peace because I
Right.
know
Yeah,
I
you-
said something.
You stated it earlier that we can't help everybody, right?
Right.
Because everybody's not willing to receive the
Right.
help that we're offering.
Right.
But I agree with you 110% that it is our job to, like they say in churches, ours to extend, yours to accept or reject, right? So therefore, but yes, being involved, intervening, helping is definitely the way to go. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's just I'm enjoying the conversation, and you've given me so much to think about.
Yeah.
I don't know if principals understand how important what we're talking about is, because I know at my daughter's school, they're always having people to come in and speak to. She goes to an all-girls school. Just speaking to the girls about different topics, right? But they always send home a disclaimer first and
Right.
say, do you want your child to participate in
Right.
this? This is what they're going to discuss, yes or no, right? So I don't know the statistics, but I would love to know how many say yes and how many say no. But
Yeah.
but it shouldn't be optional. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because when people hear the word sex, they just automatically, I don't want my child. But your child already knows something.
Can you say that for the people in the back? For the people in the back, say that again.
Yes, your child already knows something about sex, whether you have taught them about it or
Yes.
not. They know something about it. They've heard it from their friends.
Yes.
They've heard it from an older brother, older sister, cousins, somebody in the neighborhood. Once again, I go back to these cell phones, watching these videos, and because I discovered the hard way that you can't just let your kids get on YouTube.
Right.
And watch, they got the YouTube Kids thing or whatever.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
But there are horrible people out there that make these cartoons that are meant to corrupt our children, and to expose them to different things.
Wow.
And it's disguised as a cartoon.
Yes.
And then, because my daughter was younger, my middle child, and I saw that and I was like, so then it's just like, no, we're just not going to do YouTube, period. Unless you're sitting in the room with me and we
Yes.
put it on the big TV or whatever, and you want to watch something, then that's fine.
But you just said something
she
about
doesn't have a phone.
positive parenting. It is parents. So if you ever come to our parent class, you're going to be told this. That I don't believe in privacy for children.
Me neither.
I believe in boundaries.
Correct.
There's a difference, because privacy says this: I cannot access anything concerning you without your consent. Not with children.
No.
Yes, close the door when you go to the bathroom. If you're getting dressed, yes, close it because you deserve. Those are called boundaries.
Correct.
But I'm going old school now. But there was no locking of doors.
No.
No, you don't lock a door, because I need to be able to come into that room at will. Because if I'm a parent and you're a parent and you have no idea and your children are telling you, well, Mom, Dad, you can't come in my room like that. You're invading my privacy. Then what are you doing that I cannot access your room? Excuse me, our room that you're living in.
Correct.
Because you're not paying
Pay
no bills.
No bills. Zero.
And what is it with your iPad? I had an 8-year-old, bragging to me in front of her dad about the codes she have on her iPad that so that her parents cannot
Yeah, they're
access
locked
it.
out, right?
And then her dad burst her little bubble and said, "Well, I want you to know, Missy, that your mom has access to all your little passcodes." And she was like, "She can't do that. She's 8. She can't access
Right, right.
without my permission." I didn't say anything,
Right.
but that let me know that we have some challenges because somewhere our children have adopted these entitlement attitudes
Right.
and these attitudes that they are the authority over everything they have. And again, boundaries, teaching healthy boundaries is different with privacy. And so that's another show because we'll be here all day talking about this.
And then something just popped into my brain when you said that. That entitlement of children who think they know more than their parents or smarter
Yes.
than their parents
Yes.
can also lead them to be in a position where they meet a predator, right? Because just like the teacher of the year had everybody fooled,
Right.
they meet somebody and they're gonna be fooled and they're gonna be like, no, I know this person is a great person, right? But if parents would have met that person, they would know, no, this is not somebody I want you around, things like that. So that entitlement attitude leads children to make horrible decisions. And once again, like you said, if parents are involved and you're an active, involved parent,
Yeah.
then that's another way to prevent things.
And then we have to, and with that, we're getting ready to wrap up the show. It's so much more that we can share. But like I stated, you'll have an opportunity to make contact with Mr. Lee with his information. And also we'll have our information on the screen. So, and on our website. So if you want to book a class or learn more information on how to prevent our children from being abused sexually in our schools, at home, amongst our family. It's just so much more information. But at the end of the day, it takes all of us working together and actually receiving the proper information so that we don't have to be fearful. Because an ignorant people is a fearful people, but an educated people is an empowering people, an empowered people. So, Mr. Lee, before we close the show, is there anything if you could share any form of information or just a nugget to give to our viewers on how they can just take action within the next 24 to 48 hours to start their journey of health and recovery and just education regarding this topic?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Nicole, for having me. Great conversation. Thank you for being brave enough to discuss this topic, and I appreciate all that Resuscitate Inc. does for the community to educate everyone. But I would just say to get involved, to speak with someone, to find someone that you can trust, to have these tough conversations with. If you want to help prevent these things, then get involved in the schools or come speak with Dr. Nicole and see how you can get involved with her organization so you can get the proper training and the proper education on how to speak to students and to identify these warning signs. So we want to do all we can to make sure that our children are safe, healthy, happy, and whole. And
Yes.
so my thing is just reach out to schools, volunteer, get involved. Start after school programs so those students who are don't have people at home, they can have somewhere to go.
Yes.
That will be safe and they will be watched and they will be learning things that can help them to be productive members of society. So
Thank you so much, Mr. Lee, for all that you've done, all that you're doing, and the impact that you're making in the lives of children and community. Until next time, this has been Reach In Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you soon.